بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us the gift of life, food, shelter, clothing, and most of all, iman, yaqeen, faith in Him. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send salutations, peace, and blessings upon His Rasul, His Messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, as well as His Sahaba, His companions, and His family, and all of those who follow His way. Amin ya Rabbil Alameen. In the environment that we find ourselves, in this world, the common ideology that has spread is secularism, or in short, you could summarize it as YOLO, you only live once. This attitude that I need to fulfill all of my desires here and right now while I have the chance. Because later on, next year, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I may not have those opportunities to fulfill my desires. So this is what we find throughout the world. It's no longer a battle of religious ideas as it was in the past. The greater ideology that has affected most of our youth and those of us who are involved in the world and going to school or the workforce, this is the common ideology. That we have to do what we want because whatever we want goes. Is this compatible with our understanding, with our faith and our belief in Islam? And the answer is obviously no. Because Islam itself is a type of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Islam means submission, and a Muslim is one who submits their will to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this understanding of submission is in stark contrast to fulfilling the desires whenever we want, however we want, and whatever we want. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually wants us to disobey the desires and not obey it. In Surah Al-Jathiyah, verse 23, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ وَأَضَلَّهُ اللَّهُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ وَخَتَمَ عَلَى سَمْعِهِ وَقَلْبِهِ وَجَعَلَ عَلَى بَصَرِهِ غِشَاوَةً فَمَنْ يَهْدِيهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ اللَّهِ أَفَلَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. Allah asks a question. He says, have you seen the individual who has made their focal point and their God? God meaning the source of your adoration, the source of your attention. Have you seen the individual who's made their God their own desires? Here, God doesn't mean like a divine creator of the universe. It means that whatever you give all of your attention to, in practicality, in practice, that is your God. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing our attention towards the one who makes their desires of that stature. Have you seen the one who makes their desires their God? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has led them astray despite the fact that they know better. What do they know better? Maybe they are Muslim. Maybe they are a person who believes in the existence of Allah. Maybe they know what they're doing is wrong. Yet they cannot fight those desires, and they have chosen their desires as the focal point of what they are going to submit to. So in practice, they are submitting their will to their desires instead of submitting their will to Allah. And that is in contrast to being called a Muslim. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala further states, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a sense has cursed this person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sealed their hearing, their hearts. Allah has put a curtain over their eyes. And this is not because of something that they are innocent of. Rather, these people have done something. Due to that action, they are now sealed. If we continuously disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we continuously ignore the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there comes a time when the ears can hear but they don't listen. The eyes can see but they do not observe. The tongue can speak but it does not speak anything good. The mind can think, but it's not positive. This is what happens to these people because of the continuous disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the following of their own desires. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states that this is what happens to them. There's a curtain that is put before their eyes. A lot of people in today's time like to compare the situation that we live in to the Matrix. They say that we live in a fake world, and absolutely that is true. This world is a test from Allah, and He tells us, and this is what we learn from the Quran and the Sunnah, that the true life is in the hereafter. وَإِنَّ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ. Allah says the true life is in the home of the hereafter, which means this is not the true life. So those who are comparing this dunyawi life or the situation that we see before us to the Matrix, they're not absolutely wrong. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks a question in this ayah, فَمَن يَهْدِيهِ مِن بَعْدِ اللَّهِ. Who can guide a person other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? If Allah does not guide an individual, where will they get guidance from? Meaning, if we choose to ignore the signs of Allah, we choose to ignore the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the religion of Islam, where else can we find guidance then? And what the ayah is telling us, Allah finishes by saying, أَفَلَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. Don't they remember? Don't they recall the truth? Don't they realize that there's something beyond just fulfillment of their desires? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah is effectively telling us that we as Muslims need to oppose our desires. We're going to have a lot of desires. Allah has created us with those. So it is not wrong to have desires. It's not wrong to have desires. But to fulfill them in a way that contradicts the teachings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, that is what is wrong. And that is what is causing the curtains to come before the eyes. Continuous disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the reason. Now in many ahadith, I want to share 4 different variations of the same hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually tells us what this life is actually about, or the facade of this life. In one version, he says, "Ad-dunya sijnul mu'min, فَإِذَا فَارَقَ الدُّنْيَا فَارَقَ السِّجْن." This is dunya. And what does dunya actually mean? Dunya is this life, and akhirah is the next life. Dunya comes from the word, and scholars, they like to look at things linguistically. They say it can have 2 possibilities. It can come from the word dani or dunu. Right? The root word of dunya can come from dani or dunu. If it comes from dani means low, something that has no value. So the dunya in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no value, and in the sight of a true Muslim whose the curtain of their eyes has been lifted, it also has no value. The only value of the dunya is, as in another narration, ad-dunya mazra'atul akhirah. The dunya is the sowing field, the plantation of the hereafter. So you sow your seeds in dunya and you reap them in the hereafter. In that sense, the dunya is beneficial. Other than that, the dunya has no real benefit. It's low in its stature. So it's dani. So some say dunya comes from dani. Some say dunya comes from dunu. Dal, nun, wow instead of dal, nun, yeah. If it comes from this root letter, or root word, it means that which is near. And akhirah means that which is later. Akhir means last. So akhirah is the last abode. Dunya is the near abode, the one that we are currently existing in. And one of our teachers used to give us an example. He says, if there is a mountain of gold, and you can see this on the horizon, however, a person takes a single gold coin and brings it close to their eyes, they will no longer be able to see the mountain of gold. Because that which is close is visible, that which is far is hidden. The akhirah can be compared to a mountain of gold. There's a lot in store for us if we obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, if we blind ourselves with a small piece of enjoyment and luxury of this dunya, and we bring it very close to our eyes, our minds and our hearts, we will no longer be able to see the true goal, which is the akhirah. So that is the word dunya. Anyway, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this hadith, he says the dunya, this life, is the prison of the believer. When they leave the dunya, they leave the prison. This life is a prison. In another version of the hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Inna atwala an-nasi ju'an yawm al-qiyamah aktharuhum shib'an fi dunya." The person on the day of judgment who will experience the most hunger will be the one who had the most satiety in the dunya. The one who was always filled, their stomach was always filled with haram, of course. In the akhirah, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, they will be the most hungry. Ya Salman, he addresses the Sahabi, Dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir. This dunya is the prison for the believer and it is the paradise for the disbeliever. This life is a paradise for the disbeliever. However, it is a prison for the believer. In another version of the hadith, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Dunya sijnul mu'min wa sanatu." This life, this dunya, is the prison of the believer and the drought of the believer. It's a drought for him. When you're in a drought, you don't get to enjoy lush fruits and vegetables and a good situation. فَإِذَا خَرَجَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا فَارَقَ السِّجْنَ وَالسَّنَةَ. When the believer leaves this dunya behind through death, it's a tunnel to the next life. They leave behind the tribulations of this dunya and they leave behind the drought. And they go into the luxuries of the hereafter. That is the situation of the mu'min, the believer. Now, what does it mean that this dunya is a prison? I think the meaning is clear, but we can take some advice from Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah, who says, the meaning of every single believer being a prisoner is that they are deprived in this life from fulfilling the haram desires that they have. Haram desires. You are allowed to have halal desires, and this is a ni'mah from Allah. That we are in a prison, but you're allowed to have enjoyments in the prison too, if it's halal. However, we know the greatest pleasures in this dunya are the haram ones. And we all have whisperings. Sometimes we have this desire and we have to hold ourselves back. And we say, no, this is haram, I can't do it. But I really want it. Sometimes we fall prey to our own desires, we feel weak, and we actually indulge in the haram. So he says the reason why this dunya is a prison is because there's so many haram desires that you and I will have, and that is natural. But we have to stay away from it. We're told not to. On top of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enforces difficult actions upon us. For instance, salah. 5 times a day to perform salah is not an easy task. And the salah that Allah wants from us is not just motions with the body, it's engagement with the mind and heart as well. To give a portion of your wealth, if you're making your hard-earned wealth, to give a portion of that every single year is not easy. To fast for a whole month straight and continue on the normal situations of your life, it's not easy. To go for pilgrimage is not easy. So these actions on top of suppression of the desires, this is why this dunya is a prison for you and I. And then Imam Nawawi, he states, when the believer dies, he's free from all of that. The difficulties of holding the self back, as well as fulfilling all of these duties every single day. If you think about it, 5 times salah till you die, every single day. We've gotten accustomed to it, but it is a very difficult thing. You become very at ease when you die, if you think about it. And this is why in another hadith, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, Tuhfatul mu'min al-maut. Death is actually the gift for the believer. And he says the believer, Imam Nawawi states, the believer will go to a state of luxury that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared for them and will leave all these annoyances behind. This is how we view death. We're not afraid of it as believers. The only thing we are afraid of is maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I haven't done tawbah yet. Maybe I have not stacked up my good deeds yet. And I'm scared to meet Allah in my situation. But other than that, as a believer, we don't fear death. We don't fear the concept of death. We view death as a doorway, a passageway to more comfort and luxuries for us, inshallah. Now, one of the things that obstruct our passageway to the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that stop us from reaping the benefit of the hereafter, is, as I've been mentioning, the fulfillment of desires, but I want to talk about one specific fulfillment of the desires, which I find today is worse than it's ever been before. And that is the sins of the eyes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He states in the Quran, يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the deception of the eyes and that which the hearts conceal. Meaning the eyes deceive. We've made a pact with Allah when we say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. This is a pact, it's a promise that we've made to Allah, that I will obey you. I take you as my sole Lord, my guide, the source of adoration, and I will not go against what you have stated. That's basically the promise in the Shahada that we all have taken. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also states that He forgives, alhamdulillah, But he states that the believers also deceive Allah. We're trying to deceive that pact because we're looking towards haram. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not look towards that. So this is a huge obstacle. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in one hadith that is recorded by Imam Muslim, he says, كُتِبَ عَلَى ابْنِ آدَمْ نَصِيبُهُ مِنَ الزِّنَا مُدْرِكٌ ذَلِكَ لَا مَحَالَةً. Every child of Adam, every human being, it's already been written in their book of deeds how much zina they will do. Zina, fornication. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, whatever is written in their book of deeds, that this is how much fornication they will get involved with, they will definitely do that because that's their book of fate. And then he elaborates. He says, every human goes through this. فَالْعَيْنَانِ زِنَاهُمَا النَّظَرِ. The eyes do a zina. The eyes do a fornication, and that is looking at haram. وَالْأُذُنَانِ زِنَاهُمَا الْإِسْتِمَاعِ. The ears do a type of zina. And this is the broader definition of zina, meaning to that which leads towards the real zina. The ears do a type of zina, and that's listening towards haram. وَاللِّسَانُ زِنَاهُ الْكَلَامِ. The tongue does a zina, and that is speech, incorrect speech, lewd speech. وَالْيَدُ زِنَاهَ الْبَطَشِ. The hands, the zina is to reach towards something that's haram. وَالرِّجْلُ زِنَاهَ الْخُطَى. The legs, the zina of the legs is to walk towards indecent things. وَالْقَلْبُ يَهْوَى وَيَتَمَنَّى. And the heart will continue to desire. وَيُصَدِّقُ ذَلِكَ الْفَرْجُ وَيُكَذِّبُهُ. All of this is happening. At the end, it is the private parts of an individual that will either accept it or deny it. So here Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us something, that this concept of zina is very broad. It is not just the action itself, but it is that which leads to it. So we can call this the lesser zina, and the greater zina is the actual act itself. So Rasulullah ﷺ says that all of this is written and a person will engage in that. We do not know what is written in our book of deeds, so we have to stay away from this. What we take away from this is when we deceive, when we look at something that is haram, in reality we are doing a form of zina, and zina is of course a major sin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us in the Quran as well to control the eyes. It's a test. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this life is a test. So everything that you have, all your faculties are being tested at all times. Your ears are being tested, your eyes are being tested. In ayah in Surah An-Nur, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُم. Tell the believers to control their eyes, to lower their gaze. To lower their gaze. When things that are haram come in your field of vision, you are told to lower the gaze. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean to look down, it means to look away. And tell them to protect their private parts. ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ. This is more pure for them. This will cause them to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّ اللَّهَ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا يَصْنَعُونَ. Allah is aware what they do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what you and I do. No other human being will know whether you are deceiving using your eyes or not. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fully aware. And it's being recorded. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can expose us if He wants. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also addresses the believing women. وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ. Tell the believing women, يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبَصَارِهِنْ, to lower their eyes as well. وَيَحْفَظْنَ فُرُوجَهُنْ, and to protect their private parts as well, through lowering the gaze. There is no better antidote to having desires than to not look. If we suffer from having a lot of desires, these incorrect desires that come to a person, the best antidote is mentioned here in the Quran itself. Do not look. But once you've seen, then the poison has already reached inside. It's going to turn into thoughts. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us the answer to nip it in the bud, to go into the roots of the matter and to stop it from the roots. And that is that you and I control our gaze. If we can properly control our gaze, we will definitely see a decrease in haram desires, and ultimately this will allow us to concentrate more on the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and towards things that are productive. Imam al-Qurtubi talks about this verse, the Spanish scholar who is a very famous mufassir. He says, the eyes are the greatest windows to the heart. The eyes are the greatest windows to the heart, meaning what you see with the eyes has the greatest effect on the whisperings that you find in your heart. It's more than the ears, more than the tongue, more than any other power and limb that you have. He says, وَبِحَسَبِ ذَلِكَ كَثُرَ السُّقُوطُ مِنْ جِهَتِهِ وَوَجَبَ التَّحْذِيرُ مِنْهُ. Due to this, the eyes being the main window towards your heart, there's a lot of emphasis in Islam to stay away from misusing the eyes. And many people have fallen, many people have gone into difficult situations because of misuse of the eyes. And he says, وَغَضُّهُ وَاجِبٌ عَنْ جَمِيعِ الْمُحَرَّمَاتِ. To lower the gaze and to avert the gaze is absolutely compulsory regarding everything that is haram. So this is the position and this is the commandment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not a recommendation, it's actually a commandment for believers. And because we're living in a prison, we have to act that way. Prisoners are deprived from certain things. They don't have freedom. They can't walk around. They can't do whatever they want until told when to do that. So prisoners are allowed to eat. They are allowed time to go out and walk around in the yard, etc. But they are told when to do it. This is the comparison for you and I. We are allowed to do stuff. We are allowed to get married. We are allowed to eat food. We are allowed to have many things. However, we're told when to do it. That's why you and I are prisoners. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also has echoed these commandments in the Quran. He says in one hadith, "Idmanu li sittan min anfusikum admanu lakum al-jannah." Guarantee me 6 things and I will guarantee you paradise. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, if you can do these 6 things, then I guarantee you paradise. And what are the 6 things? He says, "Usduqu idha haddathtum." When you speak, tell the truth. No matter what. Tell the truth when you speak. وَأَوْفُوا إِذَا عَاهَدتُّمْ. And whenever you make an oath and a promise that you are going to do something, fulfill that promise. Do not go back on your promises. Do not be what they call someone who flakes, someone who says he will be there and he's not there, a breaker of oaths. وَأَدُّوا إِذَا تُمِنْتُمْ. Whenever someone places their trust in you, they leave something with you, or they trust you for whatever reason, do not defy that. Do not deceive that trust of theirs. وَاحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَكُمْ. And protect your private parts. Protect it from doing haram. وَغَضُّوا أَبْصَارَكُمْ. And lower the gaze. وَكُفُّوا أَيْدِيَكُمْ. And prevent the hands from harming anyone. If you can do these things, then when we look at them, he's not focusing on ibadah, he's focusing on self-restraint. Fulfilling your word and self-restraint. If you can do these things, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's guaranteeing us Jannah. Of course, with what is fard, doesn't mean that now you don't have to perform salah, but you act as a true Muslim. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says this is the gateway towards Jannah. In another hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam warns us. He says, "Iyyakum al-julus fi turuqat." I warn you and I caution you of sitting in roadways. In this context, like, just going out in public spaces. He says, don't go in public spaces. I'm warning you. فَقَالُوا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ مَا لَنَا مِن مُجَالِسَنَا بُدٌّ نَتَحَدَّثُ فِيهَا. Some of the Sahaba said, but Messenger of Allah, we have to go. We have to go to these places. Some of our jobs are connected with public spaces. We find ourselves going to the grocery store. We find ourselves doing all of these things. It's necessary. How can we stay away from it? So then he says, فَإِذَا أَبَيْتُمْ إِلَّا الْمَجْلِسِ فَأَعْطُوا الطَّرِيقَ حَقَّهُ. If you say that you have to engage in these public spaces, and the word used is tariq, meaning the road. If you have to go to the road, then give the road its right. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is giving a concession that you can be in public spaces, you can go out onto the road, you can go to the grocery store, no problem. However, there is a right that you have to give to these places. قال وما حق الطريق يا رسول الله. Sahaba said, what is this right that we have to give to the road? He says, غض البصر وكف الأذى ورد السلام والأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر. These few things, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, is the right of public spaces. Number 1, lowering the gaze. This does not mean that you look at the floor when you walk. Some people exaggerate and they only look at the floor when they walk and they end up getting a hunchback because of that. It means to avert the gaze when necessary. Avert the gaze when necessary. If someone is walking, they're not wearing clothing, that's their affair. You have to do the right of the road is to look away. Number 1. Number two, kaful adha, don't harm anyone. If you're going to go into a public space, don't harm anyone, physically, verbally, in any way. And looking at someone improperly, indecently, is a type of harm. Number three, waraddu salam. If someone gives you salam, answer that salam. That is their right and the right of the road. Wal amr bil ma'ruf wal nahy anil munkar. 4 and 5, command good whenever you can and forbid evil whenever you can, whenever possible. To spread goodness and awareness. You see a Muslim brother or sister, and you gauge the situation, you realize they will listen to you, inshallah. You remind them gently. This is the right of the road. So we are allowed as Muslims to engage with society. There's no harm in that. However, there are certain rules that you and I have to observe, and this is what Rasulullah ﷺ tells us. I'm going to share some statements of the pious regarding lowering the gaze. Anas radiallahu anhu said, إذا مرت بك امرأة فغمض عينيك حتى تجاوزك. He's addressing men, if a woman passes your way, and this can apply to women as well, if a man that has, he is not looking decent, passes your way, then close your eyes until they pass. If a woman that is not wearing proper clothing passes your way, close your eyes, or he says ghammid, meaning close your eyes until she passes, avert the gaze, don't look, don't stare. Right? There are going to be people like that. Another person said, "Man hafidha basarahu awrathahu Allahu nuran fi basiratihi." Someone who protects the eyes, they don't look at haram, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them spiritual insight. So we are depriving ourselves from spiritual insight, looking deeply into things, feeling a connection with Allah and this religion, because we're misusing the eyes. And a very pertinent statement, someone said to a person, or a person said to Hassan al-Basri, the very famous tabi'i, Inna nisa al-ajam yakshifna sudurahunna wa ru'usahunna. Very apt in today's time. This was over 1,000 years ago. And this person was complaining about non-Muslim women. They were living in Baghdad, Hassan al-Basri, in the Iraq area. So that was a melting pot of different cultures and religions. So this person complained to Hassan al-Basri. He said, these ajam women, non-Muslim women, their hair is exposed and their bodies are exposed. It says their chests are exposed. So what was the answer of Hassan al-Basri? Did he say that you have to implement some type of thing to cover them, throw a towel on them? He said, Isrif basarak. Look away. They're going to do what they're going to do. You look away. And this is apt in our times. You can't drive for 10 minutes without seeing someone who is uncovered. Our duty as Muslims is to look away. Now, what are some benefits of lowering the gaze? And this is just a summary of some of the ahadith and statements of the pious. Number one is removal of grief from the heart. When we look at things that are haram, and now we have it on our phones, wherever we go, we have access to look at haram anywhere. And haram is a spectrum. Even seeing someone who is uncovered, meaning for a Muslim to look at a woman whose hair is uncovered, this is not true. This is not good to do. This is impermissible, actually. Now, yes, you're going to the workplace. There are going to be people like that. You have to interact. Then there's, la budda minhu. You have to interact in that situation. Inshallah, it'll be forgiven. However, if you willfully start looking at things like this is going to cause grief in the heart. You're going to see many beautiful faces. You're going to want something more. If you didn't look at that, you would be content with what you have. So this creates grief in the heart. The second thing, positive effect of averting the gaze, is it creates a nur in the heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will create nur in our heart. And as I mentioned before, we will get a deep insight. Scholars have stated, you get a deep insight when you don't look at haram. Another thing, Imam al-Shafi'i, he complained that his memory wasn't good. Now, the complaint of Imam al-Shafi'i needs to be understood in his context. These were people who had to cover the second page so they don't memorize both pages at once. Maybe he didn't memorize as quick. Maybe his photographic memory wasn't working. He complained to Waki' bin al-Jarrah, who was one of his teachers. He said that I'm having difficulty memorizing. So Imam al-Waki' said, protect the eyes and stay away from sin. Because knowledge of Islam is a type of nur that Allah will give you. It's a type of divine light that Allah gives to His creation. And sin is a type of darkness, and light and darkness do not inhabit the same place. The last benefit that I'm going to mention here is that it gives us the strength of self-restraint. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. He wants you to develop your character. He wants you to become a strong individual. If you can turn your gaze away, inshallah, your character becomes stronger. And I want to talk very briefly, inshallah, I'll finish in 4 minutes, if Allah wills. Things that you and I can do, methods that we can adopt, inshallah, that'll help us lower the gaze if we're struggling with this. And I think most people struggle with this in today's time. Number one, we need to start having a daily self-talk with ourselves. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, every day it is stated, in the morning, he would grab his tongue and speak to it. Probably like scold his tongue. And he would talk to his tongue and he would say, if you do not make any mistakes and errors today, then the rest of the body will be safe. And if you mess up today, then the entire body will mess up. So we can speak to ourselves on a daily basis. Write out something that you want to talk to yourself about, the struggles that you are undergoing, and talk to yourself on a daily basis. So have a self-talk, inshallah. The second thing is to remind yourself that you are a slave, and this dunya is but a prison for us. We are a slave of Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deserves our adoration and our self-control. The third thing I want you to remember is that if we want to use these eyes to see Allah, in Surah Al-Qiyamah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the believers who enter Jannah, وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاظِرَةٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. The faces of the believers on that day will be radiant and they'll be looking at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So believers, and not everyone gets to look at Allah. This is the greatest ni'mah that any Muslim knows about, is the vision of Allah, the divine vision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There can be nothing greater than that. The kuffar will be deprived of that. And scholars state that this is the worst punishment, even worse than Jahannam. You'll never be able to see your Creator. But the Muslims will be able to see them. So scholars state that if you want to see Allah, how can you look at haram and expect these eyes to also look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Nothing purer than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another point Imam al-Ghazali makes is that if you want the pleasure of ibadah and worship, the key is to control the eyes. So if you feel like, I'm not enjoying my salah, I'm not really feeling connected to these acts of worship, maybe it is because we're abusing our eyes. And some practical things that you and I can do. Assalamu alaikum. Practical things that we can do is 2 ayahs that we can do dhikr of. 2 ayahs. One ayah, Alam ya'alam bi anna Allah yara, which means in Surah Al-Alaq, do they not know that Allah is watching them? So you continuously say this, Alam ya'alam bi anna Allah yara, Alam ya'alam bi anna Allah yara. You see something haram, and if your mind is trained for it, you say, Alam ya'alam bi anna Allah yara. Don't they know Allah is watching? If you're able to remind yourself of this when haram comes in your field of vision, inshallah, it'll take away that desire. You'll be able to look elsewhere. There's another ayah that you can use, يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. He knows the deception of the eyes and what the hearts conceal. So you say these verses as a type of dhikr. You could even do a dhikr of these, say it 100 times a day, 100 times a day. Inshallah, it'll help. And so the final message is practice lowering the gaze. This is an act that requires practice, right? You're gonna fail. If you're not used to lowering the gaze, you are going to fail. Expect it. But practice. Slowly over time, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give more and more tawfiq, and it will become a habit, inshallah. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq to lower our gaze and allow us to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.